The prairie evening was sinking into shades of copper and shadow, when a young boy no older than 10 stood, trembling on the dirt road that led to the rancher's house, his small hands clasped together as though he were in prayer, his eyes lowered not from shame but from the crushing weight of fear. And beside him stood his younger sister, Anna, clutching a worn rag doll with its stitched smile fading, her little face streaked with dirt and exhaustion. And before them towered the rancher, a man whose silence was heavier than the desert wind, his broad shoulders dark against the dying light. For a long moment no one moved. The boy's lips quivered until at last he spoke, his voice breaking like dry twigs. "Can you take her instead of me?" he asked, his words so fragile yet so piercing that the rancher's heart, hardened by years of loss, felt something stir deep within. And though the man said nothing, his eyes, those weather-beaten eyes that had seen storms and graves, turned from the boy to the girl. And then without a word, he stepped forward, his calloused hand settling on the boy's shoulder, his other hand guiding the girl gently from behind. And in that wordless gesture he gave his answer, not choosing one over the other but claiming both. And so began a journey none of them could yet imagine. The house they entered smelled of wood smoke and memories, its silence broken only by the crackle of the hearth. And the children sat together near the fire while the rancher placed bread and water before them, still not speaking much, but his actions carried the weight of sentences unspoken. And as they ate hungrily, the boy dared to look up, trying to understand what kind of man had brought them in, wondering if he was savior or captor, but finding only mystery in the stern lines of his face. That night, under the roof of a stranger, Eli and Anna slept more soundly than they had in months. The warmth of the fire and the presence of the silent man a strange shield against the cold world beyond. And as the rancher sat at the table alone, staring into the flames, he felt the echo of another life, the faces of children he once knew, his own blood lost long ago. And though he clenched his jaw to hold back the memories, he knew that something had shifted the moment Eli's trembling voice asked that haunting question. In the days that followed, the rancher put Eli to work beside him, teaching him how to fetch water, how to brush the horses, how to carry firewood. And though the boy stumbled, he carried himself with a determination beyond his years, his eyes always flicking back to Anna as though to reassure himself she was safe. Anna, too small for work, stayed near the house, sometimes humming quietly to her rag doll, sometimes peeking shyly at the rancher as if testing whether he might smile. But the man rarely did, his silence a wall they could not yet climb. And yet, despite the silence, a fragile bond began to grow, one made not of words but of actions, a blanket spread over them at night, a steady hand to lift a heavy pail, a piece of bread placed quietly before a hungry child. And in those gestures, Eli began to see that perhaps they were not just passing guests, but something more, though he did not yet dare to name it. Still, shadows lurked on the horizon, for whispers of raiders and men without mercy moved across the prairie, and the rancher's eyes often strayed to the distance as though expecting trouble, his rifle never far from reach. And Eli noticed, tucking away the knowledge that safety here was fragile, like glass on a shelf. One evening, as the sky bled red with sunset, Eli found himself by the corral watching the horses run, and he felt a stirring inside him, a longing to be strong, strong enough to protect Anna, strong enough to be worthy of the man who had taken them both without question. And though he was still only a boy, in that moment he vowed silently that he would never again ask another man to take his sister instead of him, for he would stand beside her always, whatever trials lay ahead. The days stretched into weeks, and on the wide empty plains, the fragile rhythm of a new life began to take shape. Eli rising early to work alongside the rancher, Anna learning to find comfort in the warmth of the hearth. And though the man rarely spoke, his silence began to feel less like indifference and more like a language of its own, one that children slowly learned to read in every gesture, every nod, every moment he placed food before them or set a firm hand on Eli's shoulder when the boy faltered. Yet beneath the calm of routine lay a tension that neither child could name, for the rancher often scanned the horizon with eyes narrowed against the sun, and the rifle by the door seemed less like decoration and more like a warning. One night, as thunder rolled across the prairie and lightning tore open the sky, riders came, their shadows long and their voices cruel, demanding cattle, supplies, anything they could take. And when the rancher stood silent in the doorway, refusing to yield, Eli felt fear colder than any winter wind, clutching on it close as the men jeered and threatened. But then the rancher stepped forward, his presence like a wall, and in a blur of motion steel clashed with steel. Gunfire split the storm, and Eli saw for the first time the man who had taken them both revealed, not just as a rancher but as a fighter, a protector carved by loss and survival. The battle was fierce but brief, and when the dust settled, the riders fled into the night, leaving silence broken only by the rain. And Eli realized with awe and trembling that this silent man had risked his life not for cattle, not for pride, but for them. In the days that followed, Eli's admiration grew into determination, and under the rancher's quiet instruction, he learned not only the work of the land but the strength of character that came with it. And though Anna remained gentle, her laughter slowly returned. Her rag doll carried less like a shield and more like a companion. And in the warmth of her smile the rancher felt something thaw in his own heart, a reminder of the family he had once lost. Yet shadows of grief still clung to him, and late at night he would sit by the fire, staring into the flames as though speaking to ghosts, until one evening Eli, gathering his courage, sat beside him and whispered, "You didn't just take us in, you saved us." And though the rancher said nothing, a single tear glistened in the corner of his eye before he turned away. For words were too heavy, but silence was enough. As the seasons turned, the bond between them deepened, forged by labor, danger, and unspoken love, until one morning the rancher finally broke his silence, calling them by name. "Eli, Anna, this is your home now." And those simple words, rough and uneven, struck with the force of a promise that no storm could break. Years later, when Eli had grown tall and strong, when Anna's laughter rang bright through the halls of the once quiet ranch house, the story of how they came to belong would still be told. How a frightened boy once asked a question that could have shattered two lives, "Can you take her instead of me?" And how a silent man answered not with words, but with an act of grace, taking both children into his heart. And so the title of their lives was written not in ink, but in dust, firelight, and the unyielding spirit of the land. A boy's plea, a rancher's silence, and the family they forged together in the wilderness. So if this story touched you, if you believe in the power of hope and the strength of unexpected family, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because more stories like this await, tales of courage, love, and redemption that remind us all that even in the harshest places, the human heart can still find its way home.